The morning sun cast golden rays across Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom mirror. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the stunning ivory dress designed specifically for this historic day. Today was not just any ordinary Saturday in May 2023. It was the day her father-in-law would be crowned King Charles III, and her family would play a central role in the most significant royal ceremony in over 70 years. Down the hallway, Prince William was helping their youngest son, Prince Louis, into his formal attire. The 5-year-old was bouncing with excitement, completely unaware of the weight of the moment. His bright eyes sparkled with curiosity as his father explained that today would be very special, but also very long, and he would need to be on his best behavior. Princess Charlotte, now 8 years old, was already dressed in her beautiful white dress with delicate embroidery. She had been practicing her curtsy for weeks, determined to get it perfect for Grandpa's big day. Her natural poise and grace reminded everyone of her grandmother, the late Princess Diana, though she carried herself with the confident elegance that seemed to come naturally to her generation of royals. Prince George, at 9 years old, understood the significance of the day better than his siblings. As second in line to the throne, he felt the weight of responsibility on his young shoulders. His parents had carefully explained his role as one of the pages of honor, and he had been rehearsing his duties with the utmost seriousness. The young prince knew that millions of people around the world would be watching, and he was determined to make his family proud. Catherine took a deep breath as she looked at her reflection one final time. The sapphire and diamond earrings that once belonged to Princess Diana caught the light, creating tiny rainbows across the room. These precious pieces had been carefully chosen for their historical significance and personal meaning. Wearing them today felt like carrying Diana's spirit with them to this momentous occasion. The Princess of Wales had spent months preparing for this day, not just in terms of fashion and protocol, but emotionally as well. She understood that today marked a new chapter for the royal family, and for Britain itself. As the future queen consort, every gesture, every smile, every interaction would be scrutinized and remembered for generations to come. William appeared in the doorway, looking handsome in his ceremonial uniform. The gold braiding and medals caught the morning light, making him appear every inch the future king he was born to be. His presence immediately calmed Catherine's nerves, as it had countless times before. They exchanged a knowing look, the kind that passes between couples who have weathered many storms together and emerged stronger. The children gathered in the main hallway, their excitement barely contained. Louis was asking a million questions about the crown, the ceremony, and whether he would get to sit on the big chair. Charlotte was practicing her wave, having watched hours of footage of previous royal occasions to perfect her technique. George stood quietly, reviewing the order of service in his mind one final time. Palace staff moved efficiently around them, making final adjustments to outfits, checking schedules, and ensuring every detail was perfect. The headdresser made one last check of Catherine's outfit, adjusting the hem slightly and ensuring the beautiful headpiece sat perfectly atop her carefully styled hair. As they prepared to leave for Westminster Abbey, Catherine gathered her children close to her. She knelt down to their level, her dress pooling elegantly around her, and spoke to them in the gentle but firm tone they knew well. She reminded them about the importance of the day, about representing their family with dignity, and about supporting Grandpa Charles in his big moment. The family's departure from Kensington Palace was choreographed to perfection. As they stepped outside, the waiting cameras captured every moment. Catherine's dress fluttered in the gentle breeze as she helped the children into their official car. William walked beside them, his hand gently guiding George, who was carrying himself with remarkable composure for someone so young. The drive through London streets was magical. Despite the early hour, thousands of people had already lined the routes, waving flags and cheering as the royal convoy passed. The children pressed their faces to the windows, waving back at the enthusiastic crowds. Louis's infectious smile and enthusiastic waving drew particular attention from onlookers, who couldn't help but smile back at the youngest royal's genuine joy. Catherine watched the faces of the people they passed, feeling deeply moved by the outpouring of support and affection for the royal family. Many held signs welcoming the new king, while others specifically celebrated the Wales family. She saw children Charlotte and Louis's age dressed in their finest clothes, holding homemade banners and wearing paper crowns. As Westminster Abbey came into view, its Gothic spires reaching majestically toward the cloudy London sky, The reality of the moment hit them all. This ancient building had witnessed the coronations of monarchs for nearly 1,000 years, and today, they would become part of that incredible history. The Abbey's bells were ringing in celebration, their joyful peals echoing across the capital and announcing to the world that a new era was about to begin. The Wales family's arrival at Westminster Abbey was nothing short of spectacular. As their official car drew up to the Great West Door, thousands of spectators who had waited for hours erupted in cheers. The ancient stones of the Abbey seemed to vibrate with excitement as Catherine stepped gracefully from the vehicle, her ivory dress flowing behind her like something from a fairy tale. Prince William emerged next, his military uniform immaculate and gleaming with ceremonial decorations. He immediately turned to help his children, starting with young Prince Louis, who bounced out of the car with unbridled enthusiasm. The 5-year-old looked around at the massive crowds, the towering Abbey and the sea of cameras with wide-eyed wonder, as if he had stepped into the most amazing adventure of his young life. Princess Charlotte followed with the poise of someone far beyond her 8 years. Her white dress was perfectly pressed, and her hair was styled in an elegant updo that made her look like a miniature version of her mother. She clutched a small bouquet of flowers and smiled sweetly at the crowds, giving a small wave that sent photographers into a frenzy of clicking cameras. Prince George, dressed in his Page of Honor uniform, walked with remarkable dignity beside his father. The scarlet and gold outfit made him look older than his 9 years, and he carried himself with the kind of natural authority that suggested he understood the gravity of the moment. His serious expression showed he was focused on his important duties ahead. The family paused at the entrance, allowing the official photographers to capture this historic moment. Catherine's hand rested gently on Charlotte's shoulder, while William stood proudly beside George. Louis, unable to contain his excitement, kept looking up at the magnificent Abbey ceiling, his mouth slightly open in amazement at the incredible Gothic architecture towering above them. Inside the Abbey, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Nearly 2,000 guests were already seated, including heads of state, members of European royal families, Commonwealth leaders, and representatives from every corner of British society. The medieval building had been transformed into a breathtaking ceremonial space, with golden carpets, elaborate floral arrangements, and the most precious ceremonial objects from the crown jewels. As the Wales family made their way down the nave, every eye in the Abbey turned toward them. Catherine walked with the grace and confidence that had made her one of the most beloved members of the royal family. Her choice to wear British designers and incorporate meaningful jewelry into her outfit had been carefully planned to honor both tradition and the modern monarchy. This year, children handled the attention remarkably well, though each in their own unique way. Charlotte smiled and nodded to familiar faces in the congregation, including her teachers from school and family friends who had been invited to witness this historic day. She had been practicing her ceremonial behavior for weeks and was determined to make her parents proud. Louis, however, was having the time of his life. His genuine reactions to everything around him, from the magnificent organ music to the elaborate ceremonial dress of the clergy, provided moments of authentic joy that reminded everyone watching that despite all the pomp and ceremony, this was still a family celebration at its heart. Prince George took his position with the other pages of honor with remarkable composure. As he joined the group of young boys who would carry the king's robes during the ceremony, he looked every inch a future king himself. His training had prepared him well for this moment, and he executed his duties with precision and grace that impressed even the most experienced courtiers. The Abbey's ancient walls seemed to absorb the collective breath of the congregation as they waited for King Charles III to arrive. The morning light streamed through the magnificent stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the stone floor and creating an almost otherworldly atmosphere. The sound of the organ filled every corner of the sacred space, its majestic tones setting the stage for the ceremony about to unfold. Catherine took her seat in the front row, her children arranged beside her according to protocol. William sat nearby, ready to play his own important role in his father's coronation. As they waited, Catherine could see the mixture of excitement and nervousness on her children's faces. She gave each of them an encouraging smile, the kind of reassuring gesture that mothers make at school plays and piano recitals, but which today carried the weight of history. The Archbishop of Canterbury appeared in his ceremonial robes, followed by a procession of clergy from various denominations and faiths, reflecting the modern monarchy's embrace of Britain's religious diversity. The sight of these religious leaders, representing communities from across the Commonwealth and beyond, moving in solemn procession through the Abbey was deeply moving. As the moment of the King's arrival approached, the tension in the Abbey was palpable. Charlotte reached for her mother's hand while Louis fidgeted slightly in his seat, overwhelmed by the magnitude of everything happening around him. George remained focused on his duties, checking his position and mentally rehearsing his role one final time. The congregation rose as one when the signal came that King Charles III was approaching the Abbey. The sound of 2,000 people standing simultaneously created a rustling wave that seemed to roll through the ancient building. Catherine straightened Charlotte's dress one final time and gave Louis a gentle reminder about staying still, while William checked that George was ready for his moment to shine. Outside, the King's procession was making its final approach to Westminster Abbey, and inside, the Wales family prepared to witness and participate in one of the most significant moments in modern British history. The coronation of King Charles III was about to begin, and they would be at the very heart of it all. The moment King Charles III entered Westminster Abbey marked the beginning of the most solemn and magnificent ceremony the Wales family had ever witnessed. The King walked slowly down the aisle, his crimson robe of state flowing behind him, carried carefully by Prince George and the other young pages of honor. Catherine felt her heart swell with pride as she watched her eldest son perform his duties with such dignity and precision. The ancient ritual unfolded with breathtaking beauty and centuries-old tradition. As the Archbishop of Canterbury began the service, his voice echoing through the hallowed halls of the Abbey, Catherine could see the weight of the moment settling on her father-in-law's shoulders. This was the culmination of a lifetime of preparation, and she felt honored to be witnessing this historic transition of the crown. Prince Louis, who had been remarkably well-behaved during the procession, began to show signs of the restlessness that any 5-year-old might experience during such a long ceremony. Catherine noticed him shifting in his seat and gently placed her hand on his knee, giving him an encouraging smile. She whispered quietly in his ear, reminding him about the special nature of the day and how important it was to support Grandpa Charles. Princess Charlotte sat perfectly still, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in every detail of the ceremony. The young princess seemed particularly fascinated by Queen Camilla, who looked radiant in her ceremonial dress. Charlotte had always been drawn to the pageantry and tradition of royal life, and today she was seeing it at its most magnificent. The moment came for the recognition, when the Archbishop presented Charles to the congregation and asked if they would accept him as their king. The resounding "God Save the King" that rose from the Abbey was so powerful that it seemed to shake the very foundations of the ancient building. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes as she realized she was witnessing the exact moment when her father-in-law officially became her sovereign. Prince George's role became even more crucial as the ceremony progressed to the anointing. Along with the other pages, he helped manage the king's robes as Charles was prepared for the most sacred part of the coronation. The 9-year-old handled his responsibilities with a maturity that impressed everyone watching, never missing a step despite the complexity of the choreography. When the moment came for the crowning itself, the entire Abbey fell into absolute silence. Catherine held her breath as she watched the Archbishop lift St. Edward's crown high above the king's head. This was the crown that had crowned monarchs for centuries, and now it was about to crown the man who would one day be succeeded by her own husband and son. As the crown was placed on King Charles III's head, a tremendous shout of "God Save the King" erupted from the congregation, followed immediately by the sound of trumpets and the ringing of bells from churches across London. The moment was so overwhelming that Catherine felt tears streaming down her cheeks, moved by the profound significance of what she had just witnessed. Prince Louis, caught up in the excitement of the moment, began to wave enthusiastically at his newly crowned grandfather. His innocent joy and natural exuberance provided a beautiful counterpoint to the solemnity of the occasion, reminding everyone that this was ultimately a family celebration as much as it was a state ceremony. The ceremony continued with the enthronement, as King Charles III was helped to his throne by the great officers of state. Catherine watched as her husband stepped forward to pay homage to his father, kneeling before the newly crowned king and pledging his loyalty and service. The sight of William kneeling before Charles was deeply moving, symbolizing both the continuity of the monarchy and the personal relationship between father and son. Throughout all of this, Prince George continued to fulfill his duties as a page of honor with remarkable composure. The young prince seemed to understand instinctively when to move forward, when to step back, and how to handle the precious ceremonial robes. His natural grace and attention to detail suggested that the training he had received for this role had been absorbed completely. Queen Camilla's own coronation followed, conducted with slightly less elaborate ceremony but no less significance. Charlotte watched with particular interest as the queen consort was crowned with Queen Mary's crown, her eyes following every movement of the delicate ceremony. The young princess seemed to be taking mental notes, perhaps unconsciously preparing for her own future role in royal ceremonies. As the religious service moved toward its conclusion, Catherine could see that Prince Louis was beginning to tire. The ceremony had been long and demanding, even for adults accustomed to royal protocol. She quietly slipped him a small toy from her purse, something she had brought specifically for this moment, knowing that even the best-behaved 5-year-old would need some distraction during such an extended ceremony. The final hymns filled the abbey with glorious music, sung by the combined choirs and joined by the congregation. Catherine's clear voice could be heard singing along, while Charlotte attempted to follow the words in her service book. Even Louis seemed mesmerized by the powerful music, his head tilted back as he looked up at the source of the magnificent sound echoing through the Gothic arches. As the ceremony reached its climax, Catherine realized that she had just witnessed something that would be remembered and talked about for generations to come. Her children had been part of one of the most significant moments in British history, and they had conducted themselves with honor and dignity that would make them proud for the rest of their lives. The transformation was complete. King Charles III now sat upon the throne of his ancestors, crowned and anointed, ready to begin his reign. For Catherine and her family, this moment marked not just the beginning of a new era for Britain, but also a new chapter in their own royal journey. As the coronation ceremony concluded, and the newly crowned King Charles III began his procession out of Westminster Abbey, the Wales family prepared for what many considered to be the most spectacular part of the entire day: the grand procession back to Buckingham Palace. Catherine gathered her children, giving each of them an encouraging smile and a gentle word about the exciting journey that lay ahead. Prince George, still glowing with pride from his successful performance as a page of honor, carefully folded his ceremonial sash as he had been taught. His role in the ceremony was complete, but his day was far from over. The 9-year-old had handled the pressure magnificently, and now he could relax slightly and enjoy being part of his grandfather's triumphant journey through the streets of London. Princess Charlotte was practically bouncing with excitement as she realized they would soon be riding in the grand state coaches through crowds of celebrating people. She had watched footage of previous royal processions countless times, dreaming of the day she might be part of such a spectacular display. Today, that dream was becoming reality, and her bright smile reflected her joy at being at the center of such a historic moment. Prince Louis, who had been remarkably patient during the long ceremony, was now fully energized again as he anticipated the carriage ride ahead. The 5-year-old had been fascinated by the horses and golden coaches he had glimpsed earlier, and the prospect of riding in one himself was almost too exciting to contain. His animated chatter about the horses and the crowds drew amused glances from palace officials who were charmed by his enthusiasm. Catherine took a moment to check her appearance, one final time before they departed the abbey. Her ivory dress had remained pristine throughout the ceremony, and her carefully chosen jewelry caught the light beautifully as she moved. She knew that the photographs taken during the procession would become iconic images, treasured by future generations as documentation of this historic day. The family's exit from Westminster Abbey was carefully choreographed to maximize the visual impact of their appearance. As they emerged from the ancient building, the roar of the crowd was overwhelming. Thousands upon thousands of people lined the streets, many having waited since before dawn to catch a glimpse of the newly crowned king and his family. The sound was like nothing the children had ever experienced before. William helped his family into their assigned state coach, a magnificent golden vehicle that seemed to have stepped directly from a fairy tale. The interior was luxuriously appointed with crimson velvet and gold trim, and the children were fascinated by every detail. Louis immediately pressed his face to the window to get a better view of the crowds, while Charlotte sat primly in her seat, practicing her royal wave. As their coach joined the magnificent procession, the Wales family found themselves at the heart of one of the most spectacular displays of pageantry the modern world had ever seen. The newly crowned king and queen traveled in the stunning gold state coach, surrounded by the household cavalry in their pristine uniforms, creating a scene of breathtaking grandeur that seemed to transport everyone back to a more magnificent age. The streets of London had been transformed into a celebration route unlike anything the city had seen in decades. Every available space was packed with people waving flags, cheering, and taking photographs. Many had traveled from across Britain and around the Commonwealth specifically to be part of this historic moment. The diversity of the crowd reflected the modern, multicultural Britain that King Charles III would now rule. Catherine pointed out landmarks to her children as they processed through the heart of London. Each building along the route held its own piece of British history, and she used the journey as an opportunity to share stories about their heritage and the significance of the monarchy in British life. The children listened with fascination, even Louis managing to stay focused on her words despite all the exciting distractions around them. The procession moved at a stately pace, allowing the crowds ample opportunity to see the royal family, and for the family to acknowledge the tremendous outpouring of support and affection from the public. Catherine's natural warmth and genuine pleasure in meeting people shone through as she waved and smiled at the thousands of faces lining their route. Prince George, now relaxed after completing his ceremonial duties, began to wave more enthusiastically at the crowds. He seemed particularly drawn to the children in the audience who were his own age, many of whom were holding homemade signs or wearing paper crowns in honor of the coronation. His friendly gestures toward his young admirers drew huge cheers from their parents and created some of the most heartwarming moments of the entire procession. Charlotte had perfected her royal wave through careful observation of her mother and grandmother, and she deployed it with precision throughout the journey. Her natural poise and grace were evident as she acknowledged the crowds with just the right mixture of friendliness and dignity. Several times she was seen pointing out particularly elaborate costumes or decorations to her younger brother, sharing her excitement at the incredible scenes unfolding around them. The horses pulling their coach were magnificent specimens, perfectly groomed and trained for such occasions. Louis was completely mesmerized by these beautiful animals, asking his parents endless questions about their names, their training, and whether he might be able to pet them later. His genuine fascination with the horses provided some of the most natural and endearing moments of the procession. As they approached Buckingham Palace, the crowds became even denser and more enthusiastic. The iconic facade of the royal residence came into view, draped with ceremonial decorations and surrounded by thousands of people hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal family on the famous balcony. The sight of their home dressed in its finest coronation decorations was breathtaking, even for the family who saw it every day. The final approach to the palace gates was triumphant, with military bands playing stirring marches and the crowds reaching a crescendo of excitement. Catherine felt overwhelmed with emotion as she realized that they were approaching the end of this incredible journey, but also the beginning of a new era for her family and for the nation they served. The arrival at Buckingham Palace marked the beginning of what would become the most memorable part of the coronation day for the Wales family. As their golden coach swept through the palace gates, they could hear the roar of the massive crowd gathered on the Mall, a sea of humanity stretching as far as the eye could see. The sound was unlike anything they had ever experienced, a wall of celebration and joy that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. Catherine helped her children from the coach with practiced grace, though she could see that even she was somewhat overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. The palace courtyard was filled with officials, guards, and staff, all moving with the precision that marked such historic occasions. Prince William appeared at her side, his own face showing a mixture of pride, exhaustion, and anticipation for what was to come. Prince Louis, now completely energized by the excitement of the day, practically bounced up the palace steps. The 5-year-old had been remarkably well behaved throughout the long ceremony and procession, but now his natural exuberance was beginning to show. He kept asking when they would go onto the balcony, having heard the adults discussing this highlight of the coronation celebrations. Inside the palace, the newly crowned King Charles III and Queen Camilla were preparing for their own balcony appearance. The weight of the day's events was evident on the king's face, but there was also a deep satisfaction and joy at having successfully completed the ceremony that had been planned for decades. His coronation robes were carefully adjusted one final time before the family would make their historic appearance before the British people. Princess Charlotte had been looking forward to the balcony moment more than perhaps any other part of the day. She had studied footage of previous coronations and jubilee celebrations, watching how the royal family positioned themselves and interacted with the crowds below. Now she would be part of that tradition herself, and her excitement was barely contained as she smoothed her dress and checked her hair one final time. Prince George, still glowing with pride from his successful performance as a page of honor, was beginning to understand the full significance of what he had been part of. The ceremony at Westminster Abbey had been about duty and tradition, but this moment would be about celebration and the connection between the royal family and the British people. The moment came for the family to step onto the famous balcony of Buckingham Palace. As the tall doors opened, the sound from the crowd below was absolutely deafening. Hundreds of thousands of people filled the Mall, Victoria Memorial, and every available space, all cheering, waving flags, and celebrating their newly crowned king. The sight was breathtaking and deeply moving for every member of the royal family. King Charles III stepped forward first, still wearing his magnificent coronation robes, with Queen Camilla beside him in her own ceremonial dress. The crowd's reaction was immediate and thunderous, a wave of sound and emotion that seemed to roll up from the street below and enveloped the entire palace. The king raised his hand in acknowledgement, his face showing the deep emotion he felt at this moment of triumph. Catherine emerged onto the balcony with her children, and the crowd's reaction reached new heights. The Princess of Wales had become beloved by the British people over the years, and her presence with her young family added a sense of continuity and hope to the celebrations. She waved gracefully to the crowds, her natural warmth evident even from such a distance. Prince Louis immediately pressed himself against the balcony railing, waving enthusiastically at the sea of people below. His genuine joy and excitement were infectious, and the crowd responded with particular enthusiasm to the youngest royal's animated greetings. Several times during their appearance, Louis could be seen pointing excitedly at different sections of the crowd, completely captivated by the incredible scene before him. Charlotte stood beside her mother with perfect posture, waving with the practiced grace that seemed to come naturally to her. She appeared fascinated by the sheer number of people who had come to celebrate her grandfather's coronation, and her bright smile never wavered throughout their time on the balcony. Her natural poise and genuine pleasure in the moment created some of the most endearing images of the entire day. Prince George positioned himself near his father, seeming to understand that as the future heir, his presence and behavior would be particularly scrutinized. He waved steadily at the crowds below, occasionally pointing out interesting sights to his younger siblings. His maturity and composure throughout the day had been remarkable, and he continued to conduct himself with dignity during this culminating moment. The traditional fly-past by the Royal Air Force provided the spectacular climax to the balcony appearance. As the sound of approaching aircraft filled the air, the entire royal family looked skyward with anticipation. The precision flying display that followed was breathtaking, with historic aircraft and modern jets creating patterns across the London sky while trailing red, white, and blue smoke. Prince Louis's reaction to the flypast was pure delight. His face turned upward in wonder as the aircraft roared overhead. His animated responses to each wave of planes drew smiles from everyone on the balcony and provided some of the most natural and joyful moments of the entire celebration. His enthusiasm reminded everyone watching that despite all the ceremony and protocol, this was ultimately a celebration to be enjoyed. The family remained on the balcony for several minutes, giving the massive crowd ample opportunity to see them and share in the celebration. Catherine could be seen helping Louis wave at different sections of the crowd, ensuring that as many people as possible felt acknowledged and included in the moment. Her natural instinct to connect with people shone through even during this formal occasion. As they prepared to leave the balcony, King Charles III gathered his family around him for a final acknowledgement of the crowd. The image of the newly crowned king surrounded by 3 generations of his family created a powerful symbol of continuity and stability that resonated deeply with the British people and observers around the world. The Wales family's final waves from the balcony were met with renewed cheers from the crowd below, many of whom had waited hours for this moment. As they stepped back inside Buckingham Palace, they carried with them the memory of an extraordinary day that had transformed them all and marked the beginning of a new chapter in British history. As the Wales family stepped back inside Buckingham Palace after their triumphant balcony appearance, the magnitude of what they had just experienced began to settle over them. The thunderous cheers from the crowd outside gradually faded to a distant hum, but the energy and emotion of the day continued to pulse through the palace corridors. Catherine looked around at her children's faces, seeing a mixture of exhaustion, exhilaration, and wonder that perfectly captured how she felt herself. Prince Louis, who had been the star of the balcony appearance with his animated waves and genuine delight, was now beginning to show signs that the long day was catching up with him. The 5-year-old had been remarkably well behaved throughout the entire coronation, but Catherine could see that he was starting to tire. She knelt down to his level, smoothing his hair and telling him how proud she was of his behavior throughout this very special day. Princess Charlotte was still glowing with excitement from their appearance before the crowds. The 8-year-old had loved every moment of being on the famous balcony, and she chattered excitedly about the incredible sight of all those people gathered below. Her natural grace and poise throughout the day had been remarkable, and she seemed to have instinctively understood the significance of each moment. Prince George appeared thoughtful and somewhat reflective as he processed everything he had experienced. His role as a page of honor had been demanding and important, and he had risen to the challenge magnificently. Now, as he looked back on the day's events, he seemed to be developing a deeper understanding of his future role and responsibilities within the royal family. The newly crowned King Charles III appeared in the palace's private quarters, having finally removed his heavy coronation robes and crown. The transformation from the formal ceremonial figure they had seen in Westminster Abbey to the familiar grandfather the children knew and loved was striking. His face showed the exhaustion of the long day, but also a deep satisfaction and joy at having successfully completed the ceremony he had been preparing for his entire life. Catherine approached her father-in-law with genuine warmth and affection, congratulating him on his magnificent coronation and telling him how honored they had all felt to be part of such a historic moment. The king's response was emotional, as he thanked his family for their support and participation in what had been the most important day of his reign. Queen Camilla joined the family gathering, looking radiant despite the long day. Her own coronation had been deeply moving, and she seemed overwhelmed by the positive response from the British people. The children, who had developed a warm relationship with their step-grandmother over the years, rushed to congratulate her and share their excitement about the incredible day they had all shared. As the family settled into the palace's private sitting room, they began to reflect on the extraordinary events they had witnessed and been part of. Prince William spoke about his pride in watching his father finally achieve the moment he had been preparing for throughout his life, while also expressing his own sense of the responsibility that would one day pass to him. The children were full of questions and observations about everything they had experienced. Louis wanted to know when they might go on the balcony again, while Charlotte was fascinated by the details of the ceremony and the meaning behind different elements of the coronation ritual. George, meanwhile, was processing his own role in the historic ceremony and seemed proud of how well he had performed his duties. Catherine found herself reflecting on how this day would be remembered by her children for the rest of their lives. They had not only witnessed history being made, but had been active participants in one of the most significant moments in modern British royal history. The photographs and footage from the day would become treasured family memories, but more than that, they would serve as documentation of their place in the continuing story of the British monarchy. The palace staff began preparations for the coronation reception, where the royal family would host heads of state, Commonwealth leaders, and other distinguished guests from around the world. This more intimate celebration would provide an opportunity for the family to interact personally with many of the international dignitaries who had attended the coronation ceremony. As evening approached, and the crowds outside the palace began to disperse, the Wales family prepared to transition from the public pageantry of the coronation to the more private celebrations that would continue into the night. The children would soon need to be put to bed, their extraordinary day finally coming to an end, but the memories they had created would last a lifetime. Catherine looked around at her family, taking in this quiet moment before the evening's festivities began. Her children had conducted themselves with remarkable dignity and grace throughout one of the most demanding and significant days in royal protocol. They had shown the British people and the world that the future of the monarchy was in capable hands. The coronation of King Charles III had been a triumph in every sense, combining ancient tradition with modern celebration in a way that honored both the past and the future. For the Wales family, it had been a day of personal pride, public duty, and family unity that perfectly encapsulated their role at the heart of the British monarchy. As they prepared to rejoin the wider celebrations, Catherine felt a deep sense of gratitude for having been part of such a historic moment. The coronation had not only marked the beginning of King Charles III's reign, but it also demonstrated the strength, continuity, and enduring appeal of the royal family that her children would one day lead into the future.